Hi everyone. Today we're going to be going over nutrition and exercise for type 1 diabetes management. Throughout the presentation, terms such as type 1 diabetes, T1D, or simply diabetes might be used interchangeably. These are our objectives for this lecture, which I will let you view on your own if desired. And this is what we will be discussing today. We're going to start with why diet and exercise is important, specifically in the context of T1D management. We'll then talk about how to approach nutrition and exercise. A lot of times it's viewed as something that is a daunting or temporary diet, but we're going to discuss how to view it more as a lifestyle change. And lastly, we're going to discuss some specific tips for improving diet and exercise habits or routines. So let's start with the first topic of why diet and exercise is important for diabetes management. Nutrition and diet is a sensitive subject for all adults in the US, not only those impacted by type 1 diabetes. As you can see here, 33% of adults in the US at any given time are on a diet in which weight loss is the ultimate goal. 62% of adults with type 1 diabetes in the US are affected by obesity or an overweight status, which perhaps surprisingly is actually nearly equivalent to the percentage of non-diabetic adults also affected by these. Despite this statistic, less than half of all type 1 diabetics have consulted with a healthcare professional or been offered lifestyle modifications regarding diet and exercise patterns. Researchers believe that this is due to the fact that large clinical trials have been done for type 2 diabetes patients to establish guidelines for diet and exercise-based weight management, while they have not happened for type 1 diabetics despite the obvious need. Blood glucose control is greatly affected by dietary and exercise habits. Maintaining a balanced diet and exercise routine can improve health markers often looked at in people with type 1 diabetes, including A1C, blood pressure, and cholesterol, which in turn will help to avoid some of those long-term complications such as heart disease, increased risk of stroke, certain cancers, nerve damage, and foot or leg amputation. A well-balanced diet and regular physical activity can also help to maintain a normal weight, which for type 1 diabetics can help to keep blood glucose levels under better control while requiring less insulin to do so. We'll now discuss how to approach food and exercise. It's really crucial to approach these topics in the right way because how you do so can really shape your relationship with food, exercise, and your body. When it comes to discussing food, these are some tips that you can follow to try to establish a healthy relationship between yourself and your diet. The first one here is to use neutral language. What that means is rather than attaching labels like good or bad, healthy or unhealthy, we would want to instead focus on the food in relation to our senses, meaning how does it taste, look like, smell like, or feel. Another strategy is to create a list of cues by reviewing your food diary to become more aware of when and where you're triggered to eat for reasons other than hunger. Often, an environmental cue or a particular emotional state can encourage eating for non hunger reasons. Common triggers for eating when not actually hungry are sitting at home watching TV, not having a solidified plan for what your next meal will be, stress, or feeling bored or tired. In these moments where you recognize that you are experiencing one of your cues, it's important to first ask yourself if there is any way to avoid the cue or solve it. If not, can you do something differently that would allow you to make a more informed choice regarding eating in these moments? Lastly, encourage moderation. We've all heard the saying that too much of anything is a bad thing, and this is no different for food as well. Foods like fruits and vegetables are included in our diets more often to give us energy, while foods like sweets and cakes we include less often for taste preferences or fun. When approaching exercise, it's important to always consult your physician, either your endocrinologist or your primary care physician, before starting any new exercise routine. The reason for this is that, especially for people who have not been active in a while, have an ongoing medical diagnosis in which you are receiving treatment for, or are pregnant, there's an increased risk of heart attack and other cardiac complications, joint concerns, and other internal organ concerns when starting a new exercise routine. Physicians can assess your overall health status, make recommendations, and provide guidance on appropriate exercise and physical activity. This leads me into my next point, which is to start slowly to avoid injury and burnout. Even if you were active in the past, starting a new exercise program requires you to rebuild your endurance, and it's important to not come out of the gate swinging before your body is even ready to do so. The next tip is to separate your physical appearance from exercise. We all know that being physically active and eating a well balanced diet can lead to what is often considered to be a more socially acceptable physical appearance. However, this should not be the main reason for your exercise and nutrition habits. Lastly, we want to avoid using exercise in the context of shame or punishment. We've probably all felt this way at some point, where we say something along the lines of, "Oh, I ate terribly yesterday, so I've got to work out even harder today." Or you've said to yourself, "Look at how much weight I've gained from sitting around on my computer at this new job for these past few months." Exercise is good for our bodies and should not be considered punishment. Anything that helps you to energize and nourish your body is a reward, not just physically, but mentally. However, the bottom line with all of this is that lifestyle changes regarding diet and exercise take time to develop and form into regular habits. Practice being gentle with your progress and do not maintain a mindset where one mistake or one slip up will ultimately sabotage the rest of your hard work and healthy habits. Lastly, we're going to discuss some tips on how to improve your current diet and exercise habits and routines. These are general dietary recommendations provided by the American Diabetes Association for people with type 1 diabetes. Keep in mind your specific dietary needs may be different based on advice given by a dietitian or your endocrinologist. When looking at carbohydrates, we primarily want these to come from sources such as fruits, vegetables, whole grains, which include things like quinoa, brown rice, or farro, legumes, which include things like peas, lentils, or beans, and low-fat dairy products. With fats, there are many different types of fats, some good for you and some bad. The ones we want to try to limit are saturated fats, which can be found in non-lean meats and dairy products, and we want to avoid trans fats that can be found in highly processed foods. 25 to 30 grams of fiber is the daily recommended amount. However, many of the foods you get your carbohydrates from, such as whole grains, legumes, and fruits, contain fiber in them. The daily recommended intake of sodium, or salt, is less than 2,300 milligrams per day. And while 2,300 milligrams might sound like a lot, that's actually equivalent to only about a tablespoon daily. Sugar should be consumed in moderation, and liquids should be primarily water and limited sugar sweetened and artificially sweetened beverages. If you do not enjoy drinking water, there are many ways to add flavor to it, such as adding citrus fruits and herbs, or by adding natural or sugar-free drink mixes and enhancers. Lastly, a free food is any food item that has less than 20 calories and 5 grams of carbohydrates. These foods are considered to be not impactful enough on blood glucose levels to affect them in any way and can be eaten as frequently as desired. This list includes foods like celery, cucumber, and sugar-free gum. This is the My Plate template created by the US Department of Agriculture. It's a visual reminder to make healthy choices from each of the 5 groups for every meal throughout the day. I do want to note that there is conflicting research on the necessity of the dairy group in this template. So for our purposes, I want us to focus primarily on the actual plate itself. As you can see, over half of the plate consists of fruits and vegetables, with approximately another 25% of the plate each coming from whole grains and protein. This is not a one-size-fits-all template, but again, assuming that there are no other major dietary restrictions in place, this could be a useful tool in helping to develop an idea of what a balanced meal should look like. Each week, adults need 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity and 2 days of muscle strengthening activity, according to the current physical activity guidelines for Americans set by the CDC. 115 minutes of physical activity each week can sound like a lot, but you don't have to do it all at once. It could be 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, or any other division of time throughout the week that best aligns with your schedule. This time can be spent doing activities such as walking fast, playing doubles tennis, pushing a lawnmower, or anything that gets your heart rate elevated to a higher than normal level. The alternative to 150 minutes of modern intensity physical activity is 75 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic activity. This includes activities such as swimming, running, or jogging, or playing basketball. These movements will elevate your heart rate to a higher than normal level and will probably not let you be able to engage in a conversation without having to regularly catch your breath. Lastly, muscle strengthening activities include exercising by lifting weights or the use of resistance bands. However, body weight resistance is also a great and easy way to strengthen muscles, especially for those who are just starting out. Some tips for improving dietary habits and routines. The first one here is meal preparation. Meal prepping at the start of the week can be a great way to ensure that portioned out, balanced meals are readily available throughout the week. This can look like making the entire meal itself and storing it for later consumption, or prepping your ingredients ahead of time, such as weighing out your protein or dicing vegetables that you plan on using for a dish later in the week. One of the added benefits is that while it can be a considerable time commitment when doing it, it might save you a lot of time throughout the week, especially when you are running around with work and other outside commitments. You might also want to consider maintaining some sort of log, whether on paper or through an app on your phone, of glycemic index and load. If you're unfamiliar with these terms, glycemic index is a way of ranking carbohydrate containing foods based on how slowly or quickly they are digested and increase blood glucose levels over a period of time, usually about 2 hours. Glycemic load is the amount of carbohydrate containing food you eat that affects your blood glucose levels. So, for example, if you eat a pasta with a low glycemic index, a large serving can still cause the blood glucose levels to rise more rapidly than a suggested serving. Similarly, in the same way that a smaller portion of a food with a higher glycemic index would do the same thing to blood glucose levels. Often these foods that affect your body more than others look different for every diabetic, so maintaining some sort of log can help you make more informed decisions about insulin delivery if you eat one of these foods on your log. Providing accurate carb counts is important when it comes to the relationship between diet and insulin delivery. It's easy to get in the habit of rounding up carb entries for individual foods to make the math easier for ourselves, but even if you have to break out a calculator, providing exact carb counts ensures the most accurate amount of insulin needed and will be beneficial in keeping blood glucose levels under better control. Lastly, try one new recipe a week. It doesn't have to be anything complicated, but for people who struggle with the monotony of eating the same foods or simply want to expand their palate or find new ways to incorporate different foods into their diet, finding new and committing to one new recipe every week can be a great tool in combating this. When it comes to exercise routines, finding a partner to exercise with can be a huge motivator to stay accountable towards your exercise routine. It's a great way to make exercise more fun, or it can even be a way to make new friends if, for example, you were to join a running club, an adult sports league, or a new gym. Try to have a variety of types of physical activity to participate in. Too much of any one particular form of physical activity rather, can become boring and unmotivating. So finding new ways or opportunities to be physically active could avoid some of those barriers. This might also require some exploration of different activities to participate in other than attending a standard gym. So things like hiking, participating in sports, skiing, dance classes, or other forms of exercise you wouldn't normally participate in, like yoga and Pilates, can all be great ways to add variety to your workout routine. Lastly, develop a reward system as you accomplish short-term and long-term goals. Maintaining an active lifestyle can require a lot of internal motivation. So having a reward system for yourself can be a great way to stay accountable. I want to note that while I wouldn't necessarily recommend food as a reward, something as simple as allowing yourself to watch an extra episode of your favorite TV show on the weekends or buying a new pair of jeans or shoes that you've been wanting can all be easy ways to reward yourself for all the hard work you've been doing in maintaining your active lifestyle. These are my references for this presentation, and thank you so much for watching.